Welcome back to Advanced Python. Today we're going to be continuing on with our portfolio series. In our last session, we spent some time deciding what kind of app we were going to build, and we decided on building a task manager app using a Django framework. So we spent our last session building models, building the views to our models, and then building the URLs for our models based off of a basic project or based off of someone else's project. Well, today what we're going to do is spend our time updating those files and starting to test our app. All right, so for today, our goal basically is to rebuild and customize our task manager app into the form that we'd actually like to work with. And so we have four main goals today. First, we're going to rebuild our model, our views, and our URLs. Second, we're going to build the templates. So we're going to put together the HTML code that'll actually give us a website. Third, we're going to mess with our settings and make some migration so we can pull our model into our Django framework. And then fourth and finally, we're going to test our app out. So we're going to start to test some of the functionality of our app. If you're picking up where I left off or where we left off from our last session, you should still have all of these files already loaded. So you should still be in the current runtime that has your Django virtual environment, your portfolio website project, and then your two subfolders for your application and your base project directory. If you do not, you can simply scroll back up to the top for day one and rerun all of the code. Last time we met, we talked about the fact that you can build this app from the terminal. And I personally prefer not to build from the terminal. I prefer to build from independent files or from a directory or file format like what you see over here on the far left. If you like to build from the terminal though, it's as easy as this. All you have to do is use the percentage sign, write the word write file, and then write the name of the file that you want to make. So either models.py or views.py or urls.py. And then you just write your code after that and then run the cell. And that file is automatically added from your working environment into the directory that you're working from. In our case though, we're going to continue to build from the file system format. Now let's go ahead and get started rebuilding our model. So if you remember from the last session that we had, our model basically consisted of this highlighted area here. So we created a class that we called task, and task consisted of the Django models subpackage and then the model that we're currently working on. And inside of there, we created a status, a list of statuses, either complete or incomplete. And then with those statuses, we also assigned a field called details, a field called the status of the project, which is either complete or incomplete, a category for the project, and then we created a creation date. In this case, we also want our web application to be able to have different users and different lists based off of those users, or different task managers based off of those users. So what we're going to introduce in this session is another import, which is from django.contrib.auth.models import user. And this user is a built-in basic user form or user creation form that allows for us to collect information from people such as username, password, email, phone number, you name it, it's probably in there. And even if it's not, you can modify this user field to fit your needs. Now, we're going to use this user field down here to define the user, and we're going to say that the user is equal to models.foreignkey of user, so the built-in user functionality that comes with Django, and then we say onDelete equals models.cascade. So what that means is that if this user ever gets deleted, cascade through the model, delete anywhere where they exist. And then after that, we also now need to add another line to our class here that says define the string of the self and return self.title. So basically we're just creating, with this line right here, we're creating a way for this class to call on itself and to access information from itself. So we're going to open up our models.py file, copy and paste that into there, and we are good to go. Now in our last session, one thing we didn't do is make sure that this model actually had the backend support. So this model basically creates the information, or it sets up the database for the information that we want to collect from our user. But we didn't make sure that we actually had a database set up in the backend in our last session. So what we're going to do now is go over to the settings.py for the portfolio website project, and we're going to find the databases section. So we're going to scroll through here, and then about 3/4 of the way down, we will find on line 77 a section that's called databases. And what we need to do is make sure that we have SQLite or SQLite set up as our backend support for now. And this engine is what you'll change if you want to upload this and host it on a virtual machine. And then you'll also, of course, update the name too. In our case, though, for now, this is exactly what we want. So we do have the backend support built in for our project right now using SQLite, which is a built-in local machine or local server that allows for you to build databases. So now let's make sure that's saved. Let's make sure models is saved, and then we can close those two up. Next thing that we're going to want to do is rebuild our views. So in our last case, we were working on building views that mainly focused on the functionality of the application, right? So we built in an index, we created functions to add and delete and update tasks, and we did that based off of the JSON information or the JavaScript object notation that each of those tasks had. So just passing that information back and forth. Well, in this case, because we are interested in having different users on the application, we need to update our views so that we can have functions for users to log in, users to log out, and users to register. So in this case, we have to add a lot more imports. So we're going to start by importing the render, the redirect, and the get object or 404. This is basically an if-else statement that either returns an object or returns an error of 404, which is an object not found. Then we're going to ask for authentication variables. So we're going to ask for the authenticate function, the login function, and the logout function. Then we're going to import some forms from Django, and we're specifically going to import the user creation form, which has the basic fields that you can select from, like person, first name, last name, username, password, those kind of things. Next up, because we're now adding users to the system, we also want to add decorators to the system. So one thing you can do is require a user to log in before they're allowed to use a function that's on your website. After that, we're going to load in some messages, so just to send messages back and forth between the server and the user. Then we're going to import the time zone. Then we're going to import our models, which is the task model that we just made. Next up, we're going to import some HTTP response information, redirects, and JSON response. Then we'll import JSON. Then we'll import strings. We're going to import a reverser, which basically turns around the function and sends it back to the original location. Then we'll import serializers. So those are all the sub packages that we need this time for our views. Next up, what we're going to do is change up the format a little bit. So in the last time that we were working on our views, we had an index location. I changed that from the word index just to base. So base is our home page. It's our landing page. Base is where everyone's going to end up before they get into the Task Manager app. And that will be just simply the base.html file, which we'll make here in a minute. After base, we define the user functions. So we define user login, user register, user logout. Okay, so those are all the things that we need to have different users built into our system and to be able to collect and store information from those users. And what you'll notice in here is that the user login and the user register are probably the two most complicated functions in here. And user login is just built on top of the user creation form. So you'll see that it basically requests a username, a password, it authenticates that information. If that information is correct, then it logs in the user based off the login function built into Django. If that person can log in, then it sends them to the task.html document. Task.html is our task manager homepage. So once they're logged in, that's where all their tasks will show up. If they cannot log in and they have the incorrect information, then they receive a message that says invalid username or password, and they'll be sent back to the base.html. Now, if the user does not submit a post or if they do not submit their information to the website, what's going to happen is that they're going to be sent back to the base website anyways without a message. User registration is very similar to user login, except for rather than collecting a username and a password, we're using the built-in user creation form to request that the person creates a username and a password. And all of this is occurring in a document called register.html. Now for logout is by far the simplest. If a person requests to log out, then we just redirect them to the home page or the login page, which is just our base.html document. Now, after those login and user functions in our base website functions, we have the same exact functions that we had in our last session. So we've got the task, which is just the basic task view for the task manager. We've got the add function, we've got the delete function, and then we've got update and get task. So if we request specific information. And in our last session, you might remember that I said, I personally don't like to use this notation right here that says return HTTP response redirect with a reverse and a task. Because basically what this is saying is take the task function or that URL, reverse it, send it back to its original location, and on top of that, use that as a redirect. So to me personally, this seems like an easy way to make a small mistake and mess up your code. I personally would prefer just to use HTTP response or to use JSON response. So you'll notice in this code you have both options or both examples, so that if you prefer one way or the other, you can change the code and modify it. But other than that, the rest of this code as far as the task functions goes is exactly the same as what we were working with last time. So what we're gonna do now with our views rebuilt, we're gonna collect all of this, we're gonna copy it, we're gonna go over to views.py under task manager, open it up, copy paste, and we are gonna Control S to save. And that's it. We're good to go. Our views are now rebuilt. Now we're going to move on to our URLs. And our URLs, obviously because we added new pieces of information into our model, and we added new functions into our views, we now need more URLs to map to those views so people can access those functions. So in this instance, you can see that not much has changed up here at the top. We've got the exact same imports. The one difference is in our last session, we had a notation like this that said from.views import, and then we listed each of the individual views that we wanted to import. And I personally prefer to use this other notation, which says from dot import views. And this dot basically means from all or from everything within this app, import every view that exists in this application. And so that's just a way to make sure that you have access to all of your views, even if you did not specifically import them. So I like to use that. That's what we're going to use. Next up, what we're going to do is define some new URL patterns. So again, we changed from index to base, so we update that. We also added user login, so we had to add a path for user logins. We added a registration for user registration. We added logout for user logout. And then task, add, delete, update, and get task are all the exact same as last time. So we'll open urls.py. We'll get those copied and pasted in. And let's make sure we save. And that's it. We're good to go. We've rebuilt our URLs. As we talked about though, setting the URLs in the app does not set the URL patterns for the entire application, because the Task Manager app is different from the Portfolio website app, which acts as the base for the entire project. So what we need to do now is adjust the URLs for the entire project so we can include our URLs for this specific app. So let's open up urls.py inside of the Portfolio website folder this time. And what you'll notice is that when this document first renders itself, you only have one URL pattern that's automatically saved to your project directory or to your project base directory, and that is the admin. And that's likely because when somebody builds a website, they're going to want to go into the back end and add new users and add admin manually. In our case though, we're working directly from this specific remote environment, and we want to map all of these URLs from our application into our URL patterns for the entire app or the entire website. So what we're going to do is go up here on line 17 and add to this line that says from Django.urls import path. We're going to say comma, and then we're going to add include. And include does exactly what it says. It includes URLs into this current environment. So we are going to use the path variable, and we're going to say path of, and then we're going to leave open brackets, and then we're going to say comma, include, and then we have to name our application, which is task_manager, as you can see over here on the left. And we need to put that in parentheses. So we're going to say parentheses, task_manager .urls. So what we're saying here is that when we open this website, the first thing we want them to try is to look in the URL. So look up here in our address bar and look and see if there's an admin on there. If there is not a /admin on the address that the user typed, then they're automatically going to go to the second URL path, which is open quotations and then include task manager URLs. So that immediately routes the users from the main project directory or the base project directory into the URL patterns for our task manager app. So if assuming that the address is left open-ended, so there's nothing after the / on the address, the user will get sent to our home path, which is our views.base, or that base function and the base or the home page that we want them to see first. So we'll go ahead and save that, close it up. We're done rebuilding our views, our models, and our URLs, and we've mapped our URLs from our app into our portfolio website base directory. Next up, what we're going to do is start building our templates. Now, before we start to build any templates, what you need to do over here is come and click on our application and then right click the application and hit new folder. And you're going to name this new folder templates, and then you're going to save the folder. And in that folder, what you're going to do, you're going to right click on the folder that you just named, and you're going to hit new file. And then you're going to name that file base.html. And then you're going to repeat that process 2 more times, making new files that are called register.html and task.html. Now we are going to start building the basic layout of our website. So we're going to open all 3 of these. And then I've written the basic structure for the website already. And of course, you're welcome to adjust this as you'd like. I'll walk you through what it basically is saying right now though. So for the base website, that base.html that we refer to, this document is just a simple structure of a website. So it's got a navigation bar, it's got a section that contains a paragraph and some basic information and a picture, and then it's got a login form for the user registration and login section. So at the top here, we're just calling the app Task Manager. And then we go directly into a navigation bar. And the navigation bar on the far left side, I ask for it to have a logo. On the far right side, I ask for it to have 3 tabs, an About tab, a Task Manager tab that might take you directly to the app, and then a Home button that would take you back to this base view. And then after the navigation bar, we move into a section that has a paragraph, so somewhere that I can write a sentence, and I just say the Task Manager is the ultimate productivity tool to help you stay organized and on top of your tasks. And then I have a space where I could put a picture of the app or of the interface, or maybe I want to put a video there, so it's a demo section. And then after the paragraph section, we have the login form. The login form can be slightly complex to put together, but I promise you there are great resources out there and I wouldn't worry about it. So the first thing you have to do is define the section. So we're going to define it as the login form, and then we're going to actually start to lay out the form. So the first thing we do is call on the form, and we say that the method for the form is post and the action for the form. So if the post is established and there is a post method that has been sent, then what we're going to do is request an action. And for that action, we ask that the user gets sent to the URL for the task. And that task is what we defined. And that task is what we defined in the urls.py. So the task is the name of the urls.py. So that task is this path right here. So when we ask the action to send it to URL task, what we're asking for is it to open the views.task that we defined earlier. After that form line, what we're going to do is start to label things. So we're going to say that we want a label for username, and then we're going to ask for an input, which will just be a box where someone can enter text or a string. Then we're going to put a label for the password, and then we're going to ask for the input, and then we're going to have a submit button. And that submit button, when it is clicked, will submit a form, and then we just have a short script to submit the form. After that, I put in a registration link, so if someone doesn't have an account, they basically can be sent to where they can make an account. And I say that when they click the register here button, they get sent to the URL of register, which is the register function that we created over here in our paths of url.py. And then at the very end here, I left a section for a demo link. Sometimes in developer portfolios, people will put a demo link section so that when someone is checking out your portfolio, they don't have to register for an account or make an account. They can just go in and take a quick demo and look at your work that you've done and see the system that you've built. So you can include that if you want. If you don't want to, you can just delete it out of there. Now, after the base.html, the most obvious thing is that someone is going to have to register to be able to use your website. If they don't have an account, they can't log in. So what we're going to do is go over to the register.html form, and we're going to create your registration form. So we're going to start here by just specifying what type of document it is. And then in the head section, we're just going to say that this is the user registration form. And then in the body, we're going to say register. And then we're going to request a form, and the method will be post. And you see that again, we have this CSRF token. This is basically to prevent someone from stealing your username and password off of this form. And then you see that we just say form.asp. And the reason that we can do this is because we are using that Django user creation form. So this form.asp automatically gathers information that you may want from a user and has specific requirements based off of Django system requirements. After the form, we're going to request a button, and that button will just be submit, and the button will say register, and then we end the form, and then we end the HTML document, and that is it. Now, the last HTML page we need to make is task.html, and task.html is technically probably the most complex or the most structured part of this website. There's multiple inputs as well as multiple tables that you need to manage. In this instance, though, we're just going to worry about getting it flowing today and getting it working today. We'll clean it up in our next session. So we're going to start by just defining some block content. Block content is just going to put everything beyond that line together. So we're going to say block content, and we are defining our task manager here. And then our task manager has a form. So this form can take inputs like category, detail, title. And then after those inputs, we're going to request the button that says add the task to the table. And then we end the form. And then after the form, we're going to create a task table that will show these inputs and each of the tasks as a potential table row. And we do that by specifying the table body, and we say for the task in each task list, which the task list item is specified in our views.py file. And then we say that for each task list, pick out the task ID, pick out the task detail, pick out the task category. Then we create another column that is a checkbox for either complete or incomplete. And then we have a delete button. And then we end the for loop. And after the for loop, we finally end the block. So all of this from end block on line 34 up to line 1 is all one section. After that section, though, we have to put in some JavaScript. So we create a block of JavaScript, and that block is where we're going to do things like create our add function. So when somebody clicks the add task button, it pulls on the add URL, which then runs the add view, and then should technically correctly update the table. We'll see if it works or not. Well, just like the add button, we also need a button for update. We'll also need a button for delete. And so that's just repeated throughout this section. And I believe that is the end of our HTML document. So let's close these tabs. Everything's up there. It's all uploaded. We've got this HTML taken care of. And now we're ready to move on to app testing. So if you're just following along and you're building this project on your local machine, you can run your app by simply opening a terminal, navigating to the project directory for your Django project, and then in the command line, you're going to type Python or Python 3 and then manage.py run server. And what this is going to do is open the project and the web app on your local machine under your 8000 port. So it's going to access a local port on your machine to run it in your browser. If you're working with us on this project online or from a collab environment, from a remote environment, we're going to have a couple more steps that we have to follow, and I'm going to walk you through those now. Well, the first of which is that we have to update your settings. So we don't need to update the settings for the Task Manager app itself. We need to update the settings for the entire project. So we're going to come in here under Portfolio Website and find settings.py. The first thing we need to do is update our allowed host. So on a local machine, or if you're working on your local machine, your computer in the Django system will automatically assume that that machine is an allowed host. But if you're working online or from the collab environment like we are, you are already working on a virtual machine that is held on a remote server in some location that you don't know. So there is no direct connection between this Google Colab environment and your local machine. So sending information from the Colab environment into your local machine is not possible directly. So to get around this, we have to specify the host at which our Django machine is allowed to display information. And you can try using these two hosts if you'd like. You can specify the local host or 127.0.0.1, which normally pulls up a specific port. But I personally think the easiest way is to go in here under allowed host, and what you're going to do is open quotations and then write an asterisk, which just means all. So what you're saying is all hosts are allowed. Now, technically, this is not the safest way to do this because you could be prone to a security risk. But at this point in time, we are just working on a development app, or we're just developing an app. We are not working on something for production. So it's not that big of a deal. We can work with it for now. The next thing we need to do is go down to our installed apps, and we need to technically install the application that we just created into our environment. So if I had not already done this, what you'd see over here under installed apps on line 33 is blank space, and you need to open some quotations and then write the name of your application, which in our case is Task Manager. Then you're going to hop outside of your last quotation there. You're going to put a comma, and that's it. You've technically installed your app now, and it has all the permissions and settings to access that app. Next up, we need to set our debug settings. Debug is when we're working through issues and troubleshooting and under development. So in our case, we want debug to be true. If you are ready to move your application into production, what you're going to do is turn debug to false. Now, while I was working on this project, I had an issue that was slightly unexpected, or that I've not had to deal with before, and that's because I was using Django's user creation forms, and with the user creation form, Django is expecting for your output to come from a space that's called account/login/. And so it's expecting whatever URL comes after your user login form to be after this account/login/. So in our case, it would say something like account/login/task or /add. And the fact of the matter is, that is not how our code is formatted. So I just kept getting an error. What I found out is that you can update the settings of your Django system to specify the login URL and the login redirect URL. So the login URL is the specific URL that you've set up. In our case, you can see right here on line 6 in urls.py, we've named our specific login URL as just login/, and the name of it is login. So what we're going to do is go down here under password validation, and we're going to add a new line in password validation that says login_URL, and that's going to be equal to login, which we have specified here on line 6. And then we're also going to add in a login redirect URL. Because we want, instead of continuing on with the login/, we want to redirect to an entirely different HTML document. So we're just going to say that after the user has been logged in, we want them to be sent to the task.html file. So that is the correct location for them to go to. And then once we've got that in there, we're just going to go Control-S, make sure we've saved that, and then we can close out of these two files. Okay, that's it. So we've now updated all of our settings. We can now migrate our models from our local environment into our Django system to make sure that we can run them. And in order to do this, we're again just going to call on a system command. So we're going to do Python or Python3 manage.py make migrations. Let's run that. No changes detected. Yours probably says model added tasks. If I hadn't run this before, it would have popped up with a little output. Next up, we're going to run Python manage.py migrate. So make migrations basically builds and compiles the model, or you can think of it in that way. Migrate is actually sending it to the total system. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And it shows us that these specific operations were performed and that there were no more migrations to apply. Yours probably showed you that you had 10 to 18 migrations to make, and they should all say okay. So that's that. Now, in order to actually test and access our server, we are going to have to use another package. Because like I said, we're technically on a virtual machine right now in a remote environment. So there's no connection to our local service. So what we are going to do is use a package called ngrock, and ours specifically is called pyngrock. So what I want you to do is go into your next cell and say pip install pyngrock. And while that's running, we will check on ngrock. We'll see what ngrock is. So ngrock basically is an instant shell or an instant tunnel from your application or your environment into the environment where you need that information. So it can provide authentication services like OAuth or two-factor authentication. It can do load balancing and can handle other important settings and maintenance processes. And the best part for us is that this is a super easy way to get your local host or your local application onto the internet for testing. So we're going to install pyngrock, and then we're going to use ngrock. So after we've got it downloaded, what we're going to do is import. We're going to say from pyngrock, import ngrock. And then after that, we are going to make sure that we're going to terminate any tunnels that already exist. This doesn't make sense right now because obviously if you've never used ngrock, there are no tunnels to terminate. But after we start iterating through our server a couple times, there will be a tunnel to terminate. So this is just an extra line of code to help you in the end, because this is just going to clear out your entire system. Next up, what you're going to do is specify your user settings. So in order to use ngrock, you do have to have an account. Now, lucky for you, ngrock is free for one, and two, you can sign up with either your Google account or your GitHub account. And once you've signed up, what you'll see over here on the far left is a section that says your auth token. So that's your authentication token, and you'll open that and copy that authentication token and then save it as a variable in here called auth token and set that equal to the auth token. After you've set the auth token, you're going to call on ngrock.setAuthToken and then call on the auth token variable. After you've set the authentication token, it'll authenticate your account, and then you can request a public URL. So we're going to define a new object called public URL, which is equal to ngrock.connect, and then you're going to specify the connection port, which ours is going to be 8,000. It could be 7,000. It can be anything that's open on your computer. And then after that, we're going to call on the public URL, which is a function of the ngrock package. And then once we have the public URL defined, we're going to ask it to print URL and the public URL, and that'll give us a link to actually connect to our server that we've been building. So let's go ahead and build that. After we've got that build, you can see that this is the tunnel or the connection or access point that ngrock has built for us. So let's check that out real quick. The first thing that's going to pop up is just that, hey, this is a free thing and it may not be safe. That's what it's telling you. And I'm going to say visit the site anyways. And this is good. It says failed to complete the tunnel connection. The reason it's failed to complete the tunnel connection is because we created a tunnel, we did not run our server. So there's no information for ngrock to send back to us. So what we need to do now is run python manage.py run server 8000. And you'll see that it pops up. It tells us if there were any issues. It tells us if we need to make migrations. And then it says that it started a development server at the 8000 port. If we go back over to ngrock and we hit refresh, there's our app. So our application has been built. Now what we're going to do is just run through some things and see if the website is functioning or the app is functioning as we'd like. So first off, we're going to check our navigation bar. I didn't set our navigation bar equal to anything, so technically none of these should open anything, and they don't, and that's good. We can always come back in here later and set the about, set the task manager page and the home page. Next up, you'll see that we've got that paragraph section, and that says that Task Manager is a productivity tool. What we're going to do from there is we have potential usernames and passwords that we can submit. If you don't have an account, you can come over here to register. The register page works. Let's go back and see if the demo page works. We click on demo. Demo does not work. And that makes sense because you'll notice up here, it's just putting in a hashtag. We clearly did not define the demo page. Like I said, that's an extra section you can add if you'd like. For now, though, what we're going to do is go into register. We're going to see if it'll let us register a new account. So I'm just going to make up a name. I'm going to say fold1 is my username, my password. Just going to make up a password. And then repeat it. And you'll see, like I said, since we're using the user creation form that Django has built in, it already has the specific requirements of the form as well as the allowed digits. So it'll know if someone has submitted the wrong information. So let's go ahead and register this. Okay, and there we go. So I submitted a password that was too easy, and it says the password is too common. So that's good, right? That's that automatic feature that we're looking for. So we're seeing that it's functioning. So let me give it a harder password and see if it'll accept me. And let's go ahead and hit register. There we go. So we now have a new account, Fold 1. Notice that it didn't give me a message that says your account was successfully created. It just automatically redirected me to the login page. That's not a bad thing, but it also could be confusing to a user. So maybe as we're cleaning this app up, we might want to add that message to just say, hey, yes, your account did get created successfully. But for now, let's go ahead and just try to log into our account. So my username was Fold1. Let's get my password in here. And I tried to hit the enter and that did not work. So that may be something we want to change in the future too. Let's hit the submit button and it works. The submit sends us to the task.html file and you'll see that we've got our category, our task detail. This one also says category, but it should say title, this far right one. And actually we want the title on the far left. But let's see if we can add a task to the environment. So I just randomly choosing names, school, 70, science. See if we can add a task. So it shows that the task was, or it doesn't even show the task was added actually, but it submitted the task as if it has been added to a table and then possibly added to a database, but it clearly did not show us the task in a table and the table is clearly not set up. So we've got the function, the app is functioning, but it is not functioning perfectly. And so we've got to do some troubleshooting. But what we did succeed on today is we have rebuilt our app, we've rebuilt our views, we've rebuilt our models, we've remapped our URLs, and on top of that, we've tested the functionality of our app, and we've seen that we've got the basic functions working, but we've still got some troubleshooting to do. So that is how we can very easily create a web app for our developer portfolio. And in our next session, we're going to be working on troubleshooting some of the issues we saw today in our table, as well as just the general format and layout of our website. We're going to stylize our website, and then we're going to migrate it to a backend. With that, I hope you have a wonderful day and an even better week, and I'll see you next time.